Hello YouTube, this is ahjteam. This week's tutorial is about parallel compression and multiband compression. Okay, first we need to talk about why you should use parallel compression or multiband compression. For example, I barely use either myself because I usually try to fix things at the source. But I did find a mix where I have the C4 on the master bus. I have all the music tracks going to the music bus. And here is my voice track. Basically, I am using them only just to even out the whole mix just a bit. But let's go to parallel compression first. Let's hear a short clip from my song. This is a track called Water, and I think the mix sounds pretty okay now. So let's see how it sounds. Okay. So, let's listen to just the drums first. So that was the process drums, and on the drum track I have the SPL transient designer, and it's giving out up just a bit more attack, and then I have the IK Multimedia T-Rex clipper, which is basically just evening out the overshoots that the transient designer does. So it's basically giving the volume of the drums at even level. And let's say if I don't have the transient designer and the clipper plugin on the track, it sounds like this. So it still sounds kind of okay actually, but let's see how it sounds in the mix. So basically I wouldn't even need that, but if I want to have the parallel compression there, what I need to do is I need to add an effects end, and let's use the R compressor. And let's route that to the same music group as all the others. So let's turn the volume down on that for now and rename this paracomp. Okay, so what we'll start with is that we'll turn up the ratio. So it's now basically limiting. And what we need to do is to put a send from the drum track there. And next we'll set up the threshold so that it's compressing to something between 12 and 30 dB per each hit. Okay, that seems fine. You can play with the attack and release. I don't really do that for this demonstration. Just use what sounds best. Okay, and what we'll do now is that we will slowly raise the parallel compression. We are only sending the drums there, so listen how the drums sound different when I raise the fader. Sorry, I forgot because I'm doing the almost 20 dB of gain reduction. I also need to use some makeup gain. Listen to the drums. And without it. But we also have to think that it's hitting the master bus compressor pretty hard. So maybe we'll just like keep it down just a bit more here. So something like this. So now it's more like supporting than just punching through. So let's hear just the drums. Okay, that is basically how parallel compression works. But I also highly suggest that if you have problems with the low end, because that is usually the case, I suggest that you put the mix in context, put the high pass filter on. Yep. And then start sweeping around and listen where the low end starts to get affected and where it starts not to get affected, because I have master bus processing. Listen where, also in your mix, not only on mine, listen where it sounds the best and where you get the affection of the parallel compression. So it's now doing almost nothing. Now you can hear the punching. Okay, so on my mix, I would say around 1K to 2K, the sound started to affect really dramatically so that you could actually hear what it's doing. But under that, because it's going through the master bus processing, it wasn't affected so much. So I'd maybe put the high pass filter around 300 Hz so that I would not have any problems in my low end on the mix. So let's try it about there, like. Without it. And with it. So the difference is really small. But if you encounter any problems, use the high pass filter also. Okay, let's move on to the multiband compression. So I have the Waves C4 multiband compressor on my master bus, and let's hear what we have on each band. This is the low end, only the sub bass, 0 to 150. Okay, so we have the very low end of the snare and kick and the bass. And but still the dominant thing there is the bass guitar. And on the low end you should only have one instrument. And in my case it was the bass, because the kick is doing these fast double pedal hits. So the low end would get actually removed, because I'll actually just put like some formula on the screen here. It's too hard to explain. But it has to do with the speed of sound and stuff like phase cancellation. Let's move on to the next, which is 150 to 1K. And on this zone, it's really about balancing between too thin and too muddy. So it's basically you have to choose between the shit or the more shit. So it's basically a big can of worms. And on this band, I have pretty moderate amount of gain reduction, and I have boosted it slightly so that it's in the between of the too muddy and too thin. So it's a nice compromise in my opinion. Okay, what we hear here is the mids of the bass, and the but we still mainly hear the guitar and the snare drum. If we listen again. So basically the idea is that on each frequency area you have one distinct element that is louder than the others. And in my case, here it was the guitars. On the low end, it was the bass. Let's listen to the high frequency. We'll skip the mid frequency, but we'll come back to that. So this is 6K to 22K. So what we have here is the snap of the snare, and then we have the cymbals, and then we have some bleed or the high-end fizz from the guitars. Let's listen again. But also very as few items in the frequency range as possible. But then we come to the hardest part, which is this 1 to 6K, because it is so-called the money zone, because your ear is most sensitive on this area, which is called a Fletcher-Manson curve. Let's Google that. So if you Google a Fletcher-Manson curve, you get this frequency chart. And if we watch, this is 1K, and this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6K. So basically, this area is the most sensitive part of your ear. And you should have the most important part there, which in my case is the vocals. And let me unmute. I have this vocal track here. And basically, if you listen to any modern pop record, the vocals are usually like very loud if you turn the volume down very low, like so low that when it's one step down, it's on mute. Usually you hear the snare and the vocals. And this is just because this area only has those are really prominent on this area. So let's listen what we have here when we have the vocals in. This has like so many elements here. This has the guitars, the snares, the attack of the kick, and the vocals. But listen to the balance. So basically, when the vocals are not in there, everything is still playing in a nice balance, but the vocals come over everything else. This is the low-end band. You can barely hear the vocals there, and same on the low end. But it's still there. And on the high end, you can hear the cymbals very loud there, but the vocals are still there. So the vocals in my demo are actually, you could say that it's a bad example, because if I put it on the graph, and let's see how it looks on the graph.
I'm running out of time. All is flashing by the speed of sound.
So if I would want, actually, this is like the lowest frequency that is useful in this band. So I could usually high pass it at 150 Hertz. So let's do that. Let's take the Q10. I'll use two bands, because if you don't know, these are 12 dB per octave high pass filters. So if you use them, two of them, it becomes, I think it's 24 dB per octave. So let's see. This is the graph with the without the high pass filter, and this is with it.
I'm running out of time.
And I could actually put it even higher, like 250. And let's hear how it sounds without the high pass filter and on and off.
I'm running out of time. All is flash.
It goes maybe a bit thinner, but then you can also like put it louder in the mix if you feel like so. But basically, if you want, you can just remove that low-end garbage from the vocals. And but basically, my point with the multiband compression is use them only if you have problems. Same goes with the parallel compression. And one reason that why I don't like to use multiband compression is because usually the problematic frequency is only one frequency. So let's take, for example, this bass track I have here. I'll put it on solo. My friend Seth Manson reamped this bass track through the UAG Nigel, and I actually really like how it sounds. If you check the frequency graph, it doesn't have any like offensive spikes. Like this is really smooth, and then there's the dip that I like, so that it has less mud. But if we compare it to the bass track that I had before that, which was the same DI but different processing, we can hear that there's a problematic something that makes it sound really like ass. Or then it might be just it has this high-end thing. But for example, let's pretend that this frequency here, 1058, is the problem frequency. And let's like pull that down just a bit. So we go to... actually, most people don't know this trick, so I'll show it to you. So we use the Wave C1 SC. This is important that it's the SC, which is a sidechainable. So we load the preset called Depupper, and then we choose the frequency 1058. Okay, we are at the frequency, and then let's listen to the frequency. This is actually the farting frequency that I was thinking. I didn't know it was that, so it's a lucky coincidence. So let's pull that down with the compressor. So let's start from here and see how it looks on the graph. Okay, that is the graph with the C1, and this is without it. So as you can see, we basically made dynamic EQ, similar to how multiband compressors work with just this one plugin. But the best thing about this is that it's really more CPU friendly than, for example, C4. Sorry that this tutorial wasn't so in-depth that it could have been, but I hope you learned something new. But thank you for watching, and make good music.